page 2 of the Globalization Review. Declaration of Independence. Why was it so necessary that we declare independence?
So that we know at the end of the war we'd be completely independent.
Okay, yeah, we need to commit ourselves to the idea that we want to be a free and independent nation. Amelia?
So we could be kind of legitimate so that there was a possibility of foreign aid.
Very good. Yeah, we had to be legitimate, so if we wanted any chance of France or the Dutch or any other country to give us aid in this revolution. And remember, when the First Continental Congress initially met, there was no discussion of independence. And when the Second Continental Congress got together, they, tried the olive branch petition before they ever moved on to declaring independence. And remember, only about a third of the country was actively behind this. And that was July 4th, 1776. Okay, if we go on to the actual revolution, we're talking here from 1775 to 1783. 1775 to 1783. What were some of the advantages of the British? Let's start with just advantages. John?
They had more money.
Yes, they had more money and wealth and supplies.
The naval power.
They had a navy.
They had an organized army.
They had an organized army. Good.
They weren't fighting at home, they were fighting away.
Okay, and that's a disadvantage.
Oh, is it?
Yes. We would, yeah. So let's add that to the, let's go ahead and move on to the disadvantages, okay? So they had more wealth, they had a navy, they had a well-trained, paid army, standing army. But they were not fighting on home turf, on terrain. They were not used to the style of warfare that the colonists were used to. What else was bad for them?
That meant it took a long time to get their supplies.
Yes, it took a long time to move supplies over. However, an advantage is they did have the loyalists who were actively fighting and helping them. Logan?
They weren't fighting for a cause.
Very good. Yeah, they're not fighting for a cause. And then they have all the Haitian soldiers that they're paying. They're not necessarily passionate about what they're fighting for. Okay? What about colonial advantages? Kyle?
Fighting on their own land.
Yes, they're fighting on their own land. They understand the style of warfare that will work here. Other advantages. Hero?
We had the French backing them.
Yes, they had the support of the French. Okay, secretly at first and then openly after the Battle of Saratoga. Yep.
They were fighting for a cause.
They are fighting for a cause. Yep.
They had resident leadership.
Yes, they have George Washington. Okay.
Wait, didn't he start the French and Indian War?
Well, and if there hadn't been a French and Indian War, there might never have been a war for independence. Okay, what are some of the disadvantages of the colonists then? Eric?
They didn't have a well-equipped military.
Yes, they really lacked supplies and money. The Continental Congress was, had a difficult time actually getting them what they needed. Sarah?
Lack of unity.
Okay, very good. A lack of unity. The disadvantage of having the loyalists. Tara?
Inexperienced.
Very good. Yes, definitely lacked experience. And they had a very inconsistent army. Remember, kind of people were just coming and going during the whole war.
They didn't have a strong government.
Yes, and they under the Articles of Confederation, although one of the successes of the Articles of Confederation is that we won the war, it was a weak government. It was hard to get things accomplished. Okay, as far as the key battle to know, the turning point battle is Saratoga in 1778. And that's because that's what convinced the French to formally recognize us, and they really upped their aid. They sent Lafayette. There's going to be troops. They're going to use their naval power. So that's the difference in winning the war.
We pretty much thought France were probably going to do it.
It would have been very difficult, yes. I mean, basically, we talked about Washington's strategy was basically to avoid battles, because the longer he could prolong the war, maybe the more likelihood we would have to get out of it with Britain, giving up. All right, Treaty of Paris, 1783. Some of the stipulations in that. Britain had to formally recognize our independence. The Mississippi River would be our western boundary. We had to repay our debts to British merchants and also give back property to the Loyalists. Oh, I have to sneeze. And we got some fishing rights off the coast of Canada, which was important. Now, remember, some of those are going to cause us problems down the road, because are the British going to leave all of their forts in the Northwest Territory?
Yeah.
No. Are we going to repay all the merchants and give back the property of the Loyalists? No. And those two become factors in the War of 1812. Okay, let's move in now to the Federalist era. So here we're talking about from 1790, with the beginnings of our government under the Constitution, through 1816. All right, so from the time that George Washington takes office, there's going to be a foreign threat that we face and that our first presidents are facing. Who was at war, and how were they violating our neutrality? France and Britain are at war. And what do both of them end up doing to violate our neutrality? They impress our sailors. Which means taking our ships and forcing our sailors to serve for their military. So initially, Washington, when this war begins, passes the Proclamation of Neutrality of 1793. And basically, he declares us neutral. He realizes that we're way too young, vulnerable, to get tied into some sort of conflict. And at this time, Britain's going to be impressing our sailors, and France is trying to assert the Franco-American Alliance of 1778 and say, this alliance never ended. You're still formally in this alliance with us. One of the things Washington's going to have to do to try to keep us neutral is Jay's Treaty. Does anybody remember what Jay's Treaty was about?
It was so hated. That's all I know.
Yes, it was not well liked by the people. It was not considered a success. Anybody else remember anything about it? Amelia?
It kind of went backwards. It kind of said that we had to pay all of our debts, but they didn't actually get anything in paper about them stopping oppressing our soldiers or leaving their forts.
Very good. Yes, the whole goal of it, John Jay went over there to stop the impressment of our sailors. Okay, and that doesn't happen as a result of the treaty. They say that they'll abandon their forts, but that doesn't happen. And all they do is they remind us that we owe all the merchants money and we need to repay them. Okay? So it doesn't accomplish much of anything, and the other impact it has is it makes the French mad. To the French, it looks like we're entering some sort of alliance with Britain or agreement with Britain. So what happens is they start impressing our sailors as a result of Jay's Treaty. And that's what creates a problem for John Adams when he's president. So it's going to be John Adams who's dealing with the XYZ affair and the end of the Franco-American Alliance. And I would switch those on the paper. I don't know why I put it should be XYZ affair and then the end of the Franco-American Alliance. So does anybody remember what the XYZ affair was?
Where he sent, like, they didn't know, nobody knew their actual names, so they just called him XYZ to Napoleon.
Well, we sent over dignitaries to meet with their foreign minister, and they were approached by X, Y, and Z. So the X, Y, and Z were the French. And they basically said, if you want to meet with Talleyrand, our foreign minister, you're going to have to pay money. And this was like a huge insult when this reached America, that they were demanding money just so we could talk to their foreign minister. So the Federalists, who were always siding with Britain more, like Hamilton, like they were pushing John Adams, who was a Federalist, to declare war on France. But instead, he waited a little while, sent new people over to meet, And that's when you had the Convention of 1800.
Can you repeat the beginning about who XYZ was?
They were the French people that approached our dignitaries and said you'd have to pay money if you want to meet with the foreign minister
Why did we want to be the foreign minister?
to end impressments, the French impressment of our sailors. So the end of the Franco-American alliance will come with the Convention of 1800. And that's when we get out of that alliance and formally end it from 1778. But that doesn't end our problems. So under Jefferson, how did he try to deal with our neutrality? He did the embargo of 1807, which basically said no American ship could sail anywhere. And what was the impact of that?
It hurt us economically.
Yeah, it was economically devastating, especially to New England and the Federalists. So eventually, Madison comes along and Congress changes. They repeal the embargo act. Well, they repealed it under Jefferson. But then they introduced new acts. The Non-Intercourse Act said that we could trade with everyone but Britain and France. But if our ships are out there at the sea, then they're liable to be impressed. So it didn't really fix the problem. So then they added Macon's Bill No. 2.
Which president?
This was under Madison. Congress passed these. So Macon's Bill No. 2 said, we'll resume trade with everyone, including Britain and France. But if one of you promises to respect our neutral rights, we'll halt trade with your enemy. So we resume trade with everyone, and then we say to Britain and France, if one of you respects our neutral rights, we'll halt trade with your enemy. And Napoleon of France said, okay, I'll do that. And then he ended up not following through on it. So we stopped trade with Britain, which pushed us closer to war with Britain.
Is that Malcolm's bill or?
Macon's Bill. So, what were the first of all, the War of 1812 went from 1812 to 1814. Who did we fight? Britain. And what were the causes? Why is it Britain and not France? John?
Because they were impressing the sailors.
Okay, they're impressing our sailors more. Why else Britain?
Still other their people in our colonies.
Very good. They still had their forts out west. And what did we think they were doing out west?
Rallying Native Americans.
Very good. Stirring up the Native Americans against us. And then you had this group of people led by people like Henry Clay, called the War Hawks. They were pushing for war. They had never seen war like the Revolution. They saw this as an opportunity for us to possibly gain Canada, and so they wanted this war. And they tended to be from the West and the South. New England, we know the whole time, most people were against this war because it hurt them economically. And they were Federalists. They tended to be pro-Britain. That's the end of page 2.